So we're going to do finding percentages, and we're going to do it without a calculator. We're going to do actual multiplication ourselves. And we're going to use these specific percentages, 50, 75, 15, and 13. I want to use specifically 15 and 13 because this used to be what tax was in Canada or in Ontario, and now tax is now 13, okay? So your book might do tax this way. This is how tax is done today. And then these are good ones just to kind of know. 75 is just to bring reference to something. So the very first one, if we were to find 50% of 100, all of these percentages need to be turned into something. Do you know what they need to be turned into? Decimals. What would 50% be as a decimal?
0.5.
That's right, it's 0.5. So I'm going to write the decimal value on top.
Would it be wrong if you wrote 0.50?
0.5.
5.
Nope, same number, right? We add a 0 at the end of the decimal, doesn't do anything. But the 0 is not going to do much. So in other words, all we did is we started with the decimal at the end of the number, and we move it 2 decimal places to the left, right? That's how we found our decimal. So what would the decimal of 75% be?
0.75.
Great. 15?
0.15.
0.15. And 13.
0.15.
Okay, and just as a side note, just because I want you to make sure you know how to do this, what about of 8%?
0.08.
Yes, good. You do realize you'd have to add a 0 there. Good. All right, now, 50% of 100. Well, we take that decimal value, and we're going to multiply it by our term value. So, I have 100 times decimal 5. What is this going to be?
500.
Okay. But because there's a decimal in the question, we start with our decimal here, and there's 1 decimal place, so we move it over 1 decimal place.
Yes.
What's the number?
50 decimal 0.
50 decimal 0. In other words, 50% of 100 is 50. Okay. Well, we could probably find a pattern there. What would 75% of 100 then be?
75.
Exactly. It's that exact term. So 15% would be good, and 13 would be
13.
good. So that's easy, right? 100 is a very important number to know, especially when finding percentages. So that's easy. The process then is the same. Now, I have the number 1. 1 is actually very similar to 100. In fact, if I add decimals to the number 1, I'm going to rewrite the number 1 here.
Okay.
The number 1 would be decimal 1 0 or 1 decimal 0 0. Okay. So we have 100, and 1 is the same thing. It's just the decimal's been moved 2 places. Okay. So we'll do this calculation down at the bottom. Just put our answers there. So we have 1 decimal 0 0, and we want to find 50% of that. Well, we know 50% from above is decimal 5. So let's do the multiplication here. 5 times 0 is?
0.
5 times 0?
0.
And 5 times 1?
5.
But this time,
there's 3 decimal places.
yeah, we have 3, so it goes over 1, 2, what's the answer?
Oh, yeah. Decimal 500.
Yeah, so 0 decimal 5. So, let's go back up to our answer. So instead of being 50, we're at 0 decimal 5. Well, the actual number itself isn't the same. The only difference is the decimal place used to be back here and it moved to. Okay? So if that being the case, what would 75% of 1 be?
0 decimal 75.
That's right. 0 decimal
Oh,
75.
okay. And then 0 decimal 15. 0 decimal 13.
Okay. Now, I do want to draw your attention to what if these were dollar values?
That'd be 13 cents.
Yeah.
15
Cents, 75 cents, 50 cents. Good, good, good. So, let's do the number 10. 10 is similar. We'll find 50% of it, which is times 0.5. What are we going to get here?
0, 5, 50.
How many decimal places?
1. No, yeah, 1.
1. So, this comes over to here, right? And what's our answer?
5 decimal 0.
5 decimal 0, or just the number?
5.
5. So again, the number itself is the same, okay? But our decimals would move. So with that being 5, what would 75% of 10 be?
75. Wait, scroll down for a second. Oh.
So I'm going to draw your attention to a pattern. Okay. 100 was 50. $1 was 0.5, right? The decimal place had been moved 2 over. Here, think of it like the decimal place from 100 has been moved 1 over. So instead of having 50, we moved the decimal place 1 over, and we got the number 5. So if our decimal's here and we're moving it 1 over, what's our answer for 10? 7.5. Good. Which means 15 is how much?
Oh, 1.5.
1.5. Good. And 13 would be?
1.3.
So what would tax?
I have a question.
Yeah?
My teacher says when you're doing tax, you do 1.15.
Okay, we'll talk about that after. We'll talk about that. So 15% of 10 would be $1.50. That's how much extra tax you'd pay. And 13% tax would be $1.30. That's how much more tax you'd pay there. Okay? So those are easy ones. These are reference numbers. You really want to actually be able to do most of these in your head. Right? We know that 50% of 100 is 50. Easy. 75% is 75. And then because 100 is similar to $1 and $10, we know these off the top of our head. We just got to move decimal places. That's all. Okay? So these are kind of things you want to memorize as reference points. Just like how we talked about when we're dividing if a number's going to be greater or less than 0.
So if it's like, well, so if we're doing 28, we just like multiply it to find it, right?
Yeah, exactly. So now 28 is a little more difficult. So let's actually do the multiplication for these. Okay? So 28. Well, what is 50% as a decimal? What was 50% as a decimal? Do you remember? Because we got to multiply by the decimal value.
Decimal 5.
All right. So let's actually figure out what 50% of that is. 5 times 8.
40.
5 times 2.
10.
Plus 4.
14.
How many decimal values?
1.
1. So what's the answer here?
14.0.
So the answer is 14. Good. And in other words, 50% means half of, right? Well, half of 28 would be 14. That makes sense. Let's do 75 now. 28 times 75%. What's 75% as a decimal?
Oh, yeah, that's
0.75.
Sorry. Yeah.
So this is a little more difficult. What's 5 times 8 to start?
Oh, 40.
5 times 2.
14. Yeah.
Okay. So we've done the 5. Now when we multiply 7, we got to put a 0 down here, right? And then 7 times 8.
What is that?
You know what 7 times 7 is? It's a good reference
49.
point. 49 plus 7.
Oh. 56?
Yeah. Good. All right. We get rid of this 4. Now it's a 5. We add the 5 over there. 7 times 2.
It's 14.
Yeah. Plus
5. 19.
19. All right. Good. And do I have to multiply by the 0?
No.
No, that's not going to do anything. Well, we do got to add these values up. 0 and 0 is?
0.
4 and 6.
10.
Bring over the 1. 9 plus. Good. Bring up the 1.
2.
How many decimal places are there?
2 decimal places.
2 decimal places. So what's our answer?
21.
21. 21 is 75% of 28. Okay. And now let's actually find 15% and 13%. So like old tax and new tax, we'll call it. So 28 times, what's 15% as a decimal?
0.15.
0.15. We're multiplying. 5 times 8. We already know what this is going to be.
14. Like
140, right?
Yeah,
We've done it a couple times. So already done the 5, and then times 1. Well, we got to put the 0 down. 8 and
2.
good. Add them.
0. 12. And then 4.
Okay. How many decimal places?
2.
2. So we move 2. What's our answer?
4 decimal 20.
Yeah.
2.
Okay. In other words, what would that be as a dollar amount? How much money would we be paying?
$4.20.
Yeah, that's how much extra tax on top of 28 we would pay. So it doesn't mean we'd pay only $4.20. We'd actually have to add that to 28 if we're talking about tax. And then today's tax in Ontario. This one's a little different. 13% as a decimal is 0.
Oh, it's 13.
Okay. We go to multiply. 3 times 8.
24.
Carry the 2. 3 times 2.
6.
Plus 2. Now we put down the 0. What's this going to be? 1 multiply. Good.
8,
We add.
4. That is 16. Yeah. 3.
So, how many decimal places?
2. Decimal 6. 4.
So, was tax more or less before? Well, look at our new.
Oh, it was more before.
Yeah, we used to have to pay more, and now we pay a little bit less, right?
Okay.
Not by much. Okay. So does that make sense on how to find
Yeah.
percentages of things? So keep these first. I know we did the first 3 and they were kind of redundant. Keep those in mind. Those are good reference points because if we think about it, well, 100. 100 is more than 28, but 10 is less than 28. So in other words, 50% of 100 is 50, which I know should be more than what 50% of 28 be. And 50% of 10 is 5, which should be less. So 14 does fall between 50 and 5. So we know that's a logical answer. Those will help us with logically finding things, okay?
So for this, I turned 78% into a decimal and then multiplied.